Welcome to dojo.live, the place where top minds in travel and hospitality check in to share insights and breakthroughs shaping the industry. Brought to you by Ancora, your trusted partner for AI, cloud, and data-driven innovation. Enjoy your stay. Hello and welcome to another episode of Ancora's Dojo Live, where we explore the trends, tech, and transformation shaping the future of travel and hospitality. I am your host, Kim Lantis, and I'm thrilled to be kicking off a brand new mini-series here with a truly inspiring guest, Rachel Lehman, Director of Innovation and Integration at Hyatt and Chairwoman of Women at Hyatt. Rachel, welcome to Dojo Live.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's going to be a really, really great conversation. As I mentioned, we are kicking off our series, Empowering the Ecosystem, Insights from Hospitality's Tech Enablers. This is going to be running through today, June 4th, all the way to June 13th. In the series, we're hoping to shine light on the often invisible layer of support that helps hospitality tech brands scale, adapt, and lead with purpose. That's from strategy, consulting, PR, partnerships, education. And the education piece is kind of where we're starting off today. No better way to begin than hospitality's hidden power, women, influence, and what comes next. We're going to be asking how and answering how do visibility, support, and self-advocacy shape stronger leaders, smarter strategies, and better business outcomes. So once again, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with your journey, please. If you could first kind of talk about what drew you to travel and hospitality, what led to your current role at Hyatt, and kind of why the topic of women in leadership resonates so much with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great question. The answer to both of the first questions is female mentorship. About a decade ago, I was struggling in a role in recruitment, and I was privileged to work with a senior PM that worked at the consulting company that I was at, who mentored me. She helped me through my career crisis. And I let her know I was feeling like I'd gone too far down a path to change course. And she helped me to see that my experiences lent themselves to the role of project management that I was interested in. And it wasn't a complete do-over, and gave me the courage to try. So it wasn't long after that Hyatt hired me into my first role as a project manager. And back then I wasn't seeking hospitality. I was interested in travel, very much passionate about that. But I quickly discovered that this was a place I could get excited to work. So fast forward a few years, and I'm now in my fourth title at Hyatt, Director of Innovation and Integration. And I arrived in this particular role after my SVP, Arlie Sisson, served as a sponsor during an org change and helped me to land this incredible opportunity. Your second question was about why women in leadership resonates with me. The topic resonates with me. And I think it resonates with me so strongly because it's why I'm here. I feel like I'm emboldened to pay back what women have been kind enough to offer me, which is their time and wisdom. And so I want to do everything within my power to pay that forward.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And hopefully, the viewers of our show, this is one piece of that puzzle. It's interesting that you say it wasn't in your path necessarily to get into the travel and hospitality industry, but here we are. And yes, it just so happens that women make up a very significant portion of the industry's workforce. However, it's my understanding that representation in leadership roles kind of tells a different story. Can you share some of those statistics and what the biggest gaps are that you're seeing kind of right now?
Yeah, I think one of the most striking things about the hospitality industry is how many women make up its foundation. Globally, women account for more than 50% of the hospitality workforce, and some estimates put this closer to 60%.
Okay.
If you walk into any hotel or restaurant or travel operation, and you're going to see women leading guest experience, managing teams, and generally holding things together. But if you zoom out to the leadership level, these numbers are shifting dramatically. Across the industry, women hold only about 25 to 30% of senior leadership roles. And at the
Hmm.
C-suite, that number drops below 20%. For women of color, it's even lower.
Wow. Wow.
And
And go ahead.
yeah, so I think in terms of gaps, there's a real disconnect between who's doing the work and who's shaping the strategy here. So we often talk about a leaky pipeline, and in hospitality, that is a reality. Women are present in large numbers at entry and mid-level roles, but something breaks down in that progression to senior leadership. I think sometimes this is structural, like there's limited access to roles or lack of mentorship. And I think sometimes it's cultural, like assumptions being made about interest or availability
Mm,
or leadership style. And I think ultimately the biggest gap right now isn't just the absence of women in top roles, it's the absence of systems to elevate them into those roles. And leadership cannot be a game of chance or of who like happens to get tapped on the shoulder. It needs to be intentional,
mm.
because when women are in the room where decisions are made, especially in a consumer driven industry like travel, it's not just about fairness, it's about better business.
Absolutely. And this reminds me as we were kind of preparing for today's conversation, when you and I were speaking, there were two words that really stood out to me that you were using often, and that's fairness and that's value. So better for business. So let's talk a bit about the fairness, a bit about the value. Women, I think you already mentioned, are leading in HR, marketing, guest experience.
Mhm.
They remain underrepresented in the higher levels and even in operational finance, tech. um, why do you think that particular gap still persists, especially because women drive the most travel buying decisions? It's interesting to me to are we reflecting enough of the customer in the boardroom to shape the strategy accordingly?
Yeah. So such critical topic. And I think the gap persists because women are often steered towards those roles in HR, marketing, and guest experience. While these are critical roles, they're often seen as like care functions. And when you consider the pathways in hospitality often start in operations, women aren't in those feeder roles early. And so then they miss out on future opportunities.
Hmm.
You add to the fact that the tech and finance industries are in nature male dominated, and like that bleeds into our hospitality industry, and that makes that challenge more pervasive. So I think it's especially striking, as you mentioned, women drive the majority of travel decisions. Women drive 80% of travel decisions globally, according to Forbes. So you could take that into consideration. And then when you look at decisions that are made on pricing, tech, and design, often these don't reflect that. So I think in short, we need to stop separating empathy from
Mm,
execution. And the
mm.
people closest to the guest should be driving that strategy.
Absolutely. They're not mutually exclusive, and I think they can actually strengthen one another for sure. In your experience and from what data is also showing us, we threw out quite a few statistics already in terms of percentages, but how do women in leadership roles impact the organization performance in this space? What have you seen, and are there measurable advantages for companies that they might be overlooking in terms of this empathy meeting the execution?
Right.
You know,
Yeah. The studies have shown consistently that leadership groups that are more diverse outperform less diverse peers. McKinsey and Deloitte had recent studies on this. Um, Gender diverse organizations are going to show stronger when it comes to collaboration.
mhm.
They're going to show up stronger when it comes to employee satisfaction, innovation, and customer insight. In hospitality, women leaders often bring a more holistic view of the customer journey for obvious reasons. We're
They're the ones doing it.
right. They also tend to champion culture, flexibility, inclusion, and these boost retention and service quality. So while emotional intelligence, adaptability, and stakeholder engagement are often seen as soft skills. These are really strategic assets in a high-touch industry like hospitality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit, you are one of those innovators, the project managers leaning into the tech side. So kudos. I
Thanks.
can't. The
Yes.
screen's too small. You can't see the flex. I love it. But serving as chairwoman at Hyatt, can you tell us about this initiative, how it has evolved, started and up until now? And what does women supporting women look like? What kind of impact have you seen for individuals, the broader culture, and of course, Hyatt?
Yeah, I love this role. It's definitely, comes from a place of passion when I serve and as a chairwoman for women at Hyatt. What this group is it's a colleague resource group. And we have 7 committees within our resource group. These include
Mm,
well-being, insights and advocacy, learning and development. We support our members truly holistically. And how has it evolved? In so many ways. I think in large part, I would say the biggest way it's evolved is it has grown. We've had such an influx of interest in joining our group these last few years, which I attribute to our data-driven programming.
hmm,
We've really transformed the way that we connect with our members and offer like two-way communication versus us just delivering programming and they sit in the audience. We're really inviting them to have conversations with us about what is important to them. And that
mm,
takes the guesswork out of things, right? When we're putting on a workshop, we know exactly what it is that they want and need. Um, in terms of impact, I think CRGs as a whole do a wonderful job of making big organizations feel small and creating a sense of community. Big organizations feel small. Shout out to Ranisha who
uh,
who leads up this space for Hyatt. I mean, that's definitely a quote from her book, but I think it's so true, and you can work for an organization with thousands and thousands of people, but through this type of organization, you start to establish those connections, and it makes it feel a bit more like a neighborhood, right, than a city.
uh-huh.
Um, I think in terms of my personal focus in this space, I want people to not be afraid to show up to work as their whole selves.
Mm,
And I think establishing a community of people that share similar challenges and similar goals and have similar life experiences, it creates a safe space for you to create some confidence and build your own voice. And I personally have benefited from that as well. When I was a member of this organization, I attended an event, a workshop about elevator pitches. This was back
mm.
in 2018. And it fundamentally changed the way that I showed up to work. And I was promoted within just a few months of attending that event. So, just a small picture of what could be a larger impact and why I love this work so much.
Okay, no, you can't leave it at that. I mean, I know elevator pitches are so 2018, but like, what was it? What
Yeah,
was it that you learned there and that you began to apply?
sure. Yeah. So the tip that we were it wasn't even the elevator pitch, ironically, but Miko Takayama was our guest speaker, and she brilliant, by the way. And she talked to us about how we really need to be champions of ourselves and how our male counterparts are not afraid to do this. That
Mm,
fundamentally, you know, we work differently. We're wired differently. Women often do their work and then go about their business while men tend to do their work and then shout it from the rooftops and really celebrate the fact that they've just accomplished something. And she suggested that we begin to get comfortable so that we can, when we're not in the room and our leaders are making decisions about our career, that they're abundantly
mm.
familiar with the things that we're accomplishing. And it was just like a light bulb went on in my head. And I realized I was one of those people that, while very proud of my accomplishments, I wasn't being vocal enough about them. So it was a slight change. I went to my one-on-one with my manager at the time, and I told her, I want to change the way that we connect. And I asked if she would hold me accountable to bring with me to those sessions some of my accomplishments for the week. And so it invited that conversation. I was asking her to hold me accountable to bring my accomplishments for the week, and then I felt I had permission to do so. So I came every week with a new list of things that I'd done, no matter how big or small. And again, within months, I was promoted. So I think it helped me to see how offering our leaders that script helps them to better advocate for us when we're not in the room, which is
Beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful, because not only are you externalizing this, but I'm guessing that helps you internalize it as well, because now you're actively looking for that analysis, right? Of what have I done? Have I not done enough? What
Right.
could I do? How can I make this better? What did I learn?
I kept
Whatever
lists.
that means.
Like
Yeah,
I started to keep a little list, and I was like, I did this, I did that. And it didn't come as naturally before, where now obviously it does.
yeah,
But yeah, it changed the way I thought, it changed the way I worked, definitely changed the
yeah.
way I communicated.
And and I imagine this even playing out in some of the water cooler talk, for lack of this actually just happened, this conversation 2 days ago, maybe. My husband works for the same organization as I do, and we were happening to talk about an ex coworker who no longer works with us, but has children around our age, and they had happened to bump into each other out and about. And he asked if I, got along with her much, or talked to her much when she was at the office, and I was like, well, no, not really. But it's like, but here's the thing. I was processing this. I was like, but we're women. I said, we don't we don't do that. Like, there's, you can observe in like the eating areas or wherever, and it's a majority of men, ha ha, he, shooting the bull, exchanging stories. And where are we? We're at our desks, we're heads down. Sure, we'll participate when there's a birthday party or a thing, but it's like, for me, especially as a mother who works outside of the home, I'm like, I've got to take advantage of this time without my children, because after work I've got to do that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe men don't have to, they have the opportunity to have those types of conversations and make those spaces, because they can circle back and fill in those gaps at a wider variety of times throughout the day.
They
And I
have
was
the
like, that's
mental
really interesting.
space.
It's like, we didn't really hang out much because we're both
So true. It's so true. And it's like that could come from so many different avenues. Like we're often serving in those caregiver capacities, and therefore we may be showing up with less energy. But
mm,
the result is if I, as a leader, have two employees working underneath me, one who is getting a ton done, but isn't telling me about it, the other who is maybe getting less done, but is talking about it constantly, and they both ask me for a raise or they both ask me for additional resources, I would be more inclined to offer it to the person who's the squeaky wheel, right? I
it's
think the person
perception.
who, right. I mean, so we, in some cases, need to step outside of ourselves and recognize what is doing us a service and what's hurting us. Even though
Absolutely.
the initial exercise of advocating for ourselves is hard, it is really worth it.
Absolutely. Talking about advocating for ourselves, continuing this conversation sort of on the personal level with you, in addition to learning to speak up and to do those wins time after time and to actively talk about them with your managers or the people who are in those leadership roles. What has helped you to grow your leadership voice? Where are other specific mentors, moments, other lessons that maybe have helped shape you, and
Yeah,
how to show up today?
definitely. So first of all, I work with a career coach. And for anybody who would benefit from a partner in their career journey, I cannot recommend that enough.
Mm.
My career coach is named Mary Conley, and she has taught me so many valuable things. One of which has been to find the gift in challenging situations. And that said, all of the leaders in my career have been a gift, not necessarily because they were challenging situations, but all have been a gift, and shaped the leader that I've become. So I'd, in fact, attribute some of the worst leaders of my career with motivating me to be the leader that I wanted to see. And for anyone who's seeking motivation to step into a leadership role, there is none greater than working with an ill-equipped boss. On leadership voice, I think my advice is just to show up as authentically as possible. I've in my career made the mistake of putting on airs in past roles. And I think I did that because I was fearful that I wasn't enough. And there's no worse feeling. There is also nothing quite as rewarding as showing up as your whole self and discovering that you are enough. And it's worth the risk.
Absolutely. Has there been anything so far taking those risks that you've not been able to recover from? My guess
No,
is the answer is no,
no.
right?
Yeah, absolutely not. Fair question. But I think since really making that like decision that I've had it with putting on airs, I've had it with showing up with somebody else, just because I'm wanting to fit in a mold that I think people expect and need from me. It isn't worth it. I mean, I feel like you're waiting to be caught, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, what if they find out? What if they find out that that's not really me? It just doesn't feel good. I think it puts my stomach in knots even to think about it. And so stepping into myself in this space, and if I'm not well received, then maybe the role isn't for me. And I think
Yeah.
I'm happy to accept that. But thus far, I haven't come into a room and discovered that anybody was meeting what was looking at me as though I wasn't meeting expectations. In fact, I feel coming vulnerable and as my whole self was always appreciated. I think it creates space for others to do so.
Amazing. I love the idea of vulnerability being your true self because I think that, at least let's talk about perception again. There seems to be this fine line between building confidence and asking women to conform to the traditional and often male dominated leadership norms. How do we support women in developing leadership that's authentic to them, not
Yeah.
just playing the game, or as you said too before, this fear? Because if we're afraid to come off a certain way, if we approach things as a man oftentimes would, there could be this perception that she's a big B word, right?
Mhm.
So how do we not play the game? Do you have any tips specific
Yeah.
to that of what might have worked well, has
Yeah.
worked well for you?
I do think we don't need to play the game. We need to reframe the game. I think rather than teaching women to lead like men, we need to teach them to lead with clarity, with
Hmm.
confidence, and with conviction. Like full stop. Continue to show up with
Clarity, confidence,
confidence, conviction.
conviction.
I think organizations at the same time need to widen their definition of effective leadership to not just diversify who gets to lead, but what that looks like. And that creates an inclusive environment for women to show up as their full selves and not just perform.
Mm,
So it's kind of twofold. I think women are perhaps do need to adjust some of those stereotypical behaviors of being a bit more timid, sitting back, just doing the work and then not advocating for themselves. There are moments where we're going to have to step up to the plate. The same is true for men. But we need organizations to meet us halfway and allow for us to show up as our whole selves. I think there are some tactics here, though. So offering mentorship and sponsorship is huge when it comes
mm.
to supporting women and helping them grow into that, like clarity, confidence, and conviction. Normalizing vulnerability and self-advocacy, right? This is going to be a common theme in our conversation. It is so
Mhm.
critical. And then maybe less common, but creating feedback loops that reward authenticity and not mimicry.
Huh. Can you go into that a bit deeper? Or
Yeah.
give examples of, like, could you give example? I hate to put you, I did totally put you on the
No,
spot.
I
Just
have a great example
the
actually.
feedback, the right way, feedback the wrong way first.
Yeah. Well, so feedback loops that, and let me say it again. So feedback loops that support authenticity, not mimicry. And a really good example of this, um, which my current boss, Dom Ainscoe, he in fact just did this with no prompting at all to me. He was recognizing that I'm going to be very vulnerable here. He was recognizing that the tone of my emails was not reflecting me, and that I was being a bit more abrasive in the tone of my emails than I actually am in real life. And I think what I was aiming to do was overcompensate. I'd just been given a new position. You know, I really wanted to make sure that I asserted myself, and by way of doing that, I was coming across as more firm than I intended. I really wanted to invite partnership and support,
Mm,
and and so he talked to me about it really kindly, and he said, I just be you, and make sure that you're coming as yourself. You don't need to, show up bullish. You can show up as yourself, and held me accountable for that. We talk about it
mm,
on a regular basis. I just check in and go, how am I doing when it comes to emails? So I think that that is a really wonderful way of accountability for authenticity. And so I applaud him for the way that he's managed that with me.
yeah.
And I'm really appreciative of him as a boss. Um, Shout out to Dom. And I also think that there are spaces where women are, um, I think it's even more common that we see the opposite, though, that we're pushed to behave in a way that doesn't reflect our natural selves because we have this pervasive
Mm.
idea of what a leader should look like and how they should behave. So just to give you a sense, like, it can be done well. And for somebody who knows you deeply, I feel like that's who has to offer that type of feedback.
I love that a lot. And even opened my eyes in this conversation. As a woman, I had this perception that my mentor should also be a woman, but
Mm,
there are leaders and individuals like Dom who
yeah,
are not, and they can come in and teach
totally.
us things and mentor us as well. So I learned something today, but so let's just talk to those who want to mentor, whether they're women or men, who are full on board with this type of advocacy, self-advocacy. Say that 10 times fast. Self-advocacy,
Yes.
and teaching us how to find our voice. If I am that person or I want to be that person, how do we become those mentors, regardless of our sex?
Hmm. How do we become those mentors for self advocacy? I think when it comes to self advocacy, I think it just comes with building people up, right? I mean, we can be mentors of self advocacy through encouraging one another, by pointing out those things that each other are doing that maybe we don't see ourselves, that are really
Mm,
valuable and should be applauded. And so I think when I'm doing this with other people, I'm making sure that they see their accomplishments. I'm making sure that they're noticing progress even when they're not noticing it themselves. So that progress isn't necessarily linear, right? we we may have to come back, and we may have a mishap, but guess what, you're still working at it, and
mhm,
next week it's going to be better. So I think um, encouraging and helping people to see themselves differently, and I think one of our guest speakers recently, whose name is escaping me right now, and I'm so sorry, but she talked to us about how we need to go, um, wear something on your wrist, and like slap it whenever we feel like we're having negative self talk. And she was like cancel, cancel.
I'd be like, I'd have
Yeah,
like a bruise probably here.
yeah, and it's to and then you tell yourself something kind, right? It's like,
Yeah.
tell yourself that, and it's a muscle. And so when we are working at this and trying to see all the great things that we're delivering and building towards and doing, we need to think of this as muscle memory.
Mm,
And it may take some effort on the front end, the same thing for writing down all the things that I had done for the week, right? um, but slowly but surely this is going to become a natural thing.
uh-huh.
And then I think the thing that has encouraged me, The thing that has motivated me when it comes to self-advocacy is recognizing that our male counterparts don't think twice about this. This
Hmm.
isn't a challenge. And I heard that from Mika when she came to speak to us. But I didn't see it until later in my career when when I had a team of 14, and a few of these were men, and two of the three men on the team were asking for a raise like much more frequently than any of the women on the team, despite their efforts being really discriminating. I think we like seeing that in play. I realized at the time I was like, oh my god, this is the competition I've been stacked against my entire
Hmm.
career. And I finally get a front row seat to see this in play. And so now I don't hesitate, because I'm coming to expect that somebody in the same position on the team with the same role has advocated much more strongly than I would feel comfortable doing. So I need to step up my game. And so I
Hmm.
find that motivating if I think about male counterparts as competition, and like they're bringing it. So we got to bring it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, we talk about mimicry and we talked about memory. And at the start, maybe it feels like I'm mimicking. Maybe it doesn't feel comfortable, but
Yeah.
it becomes memory. You grow into it and it just becomes then second nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Absolutely. I love it. As we wrap up, I would like to end somewhat provocatively, right? And this is some of the most important questions we all should be asking right now. Um, so I don't expect you, Rachel, to walk away with the answers, but what kinds of questions do you want organizations to be reflecting on? Women who aspire to be leaders, women who are leaders, and men as well. What should they be asking themselves and thinking about as they plan their next move?
Yeah. I have a few things that I would first want to suggest for organizations, which are, where are we unintentionally rewarding sameness? Uh,
Mm,
do our leadership pathways reflect who's actually driving guest experience? And how are we in measuring the impact of inclusion, not just tracking representation? So, like, do we really grasp how powerful this is, and therefore, in turn, put programs and practices in place accordingly to support that? I think for women, uh, I would suggest women ask themselves, am I building a career based on my values or just expectations? Where am I playing small out of habit or fear? And who am I lifting as I climb? Who am I
hmm.
lifting as I climb is such an important one, because we may be growing, but if we're not creating room for others to join us on that path, then um, women as a whole are not going to be successful.
Yeah. I love that. Who am I lifting as I climb? Because what's the alternative? Who am I stepping on?
Who am I leaving behind? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very thoughtful questions to be asking. I'm going to do myself the favor. I'm going to write these back down at the end of the show and I'm going to reflect on them. And I will hold myself accountable,
Good.
Rachel. I will give you my answers. I don't know
Good.
when.
I would
Give
love
me
that.
time and I will give you my answers.
I would love that.
I love it. Unfortunately, this brings us to the end of today's episode on Dojo Live. A very heartfelt thank you to you, Rachel Lehman, for sharing such thoughtful insights on leadership, visibility, the real impact of support across the hospitality space. It really was a pleasure learning from you.
Yeah, it was great
Uh,
talking to you, Kim.
Thank you. Before we sign off, if someone wants to contact you to learn more about your work at Hyatt or women at Hyatt, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can reach me at rachel.lehman@hyatt.com.
All right. Right. I love it. Wonderful. Thank you again. Of course, a big thank you to Ancora for powering these important conversations. At Ancora, we do partner with travel and hospitality companies to accelerate innovation through world-class engineering solutions. And of course, if today's episode resonated with you, and I really hope that it did, please be sure to follow Dojo Live across socials. And you can also catch up on past conversations and see what's coming next at dojo.live. And speaking of what's next, don't miss our episode tomorrow, also at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific, with Jackie Brown. And interestingly enough, it is about sameness as well, starting with the story Breaking the Sea of Sameness and Why Product Marketing Belongs at the Start. So we'll explore how early stage positioning helps hospitality tech vendors stand out, scale faster, and stop second guessing. There's a lot of themes here. So absolutely. So, what to do when everything starts to sound the same. So, until then, stay curious, stay innovative. Bye for now. And thank you once again, Rachel.